Hello, everyone. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, April the 10th. Today should be a pretty fun meeting. We've got some good discussion that I'm sure is going to come out of kind of a short agenda and a little bit of a showcase that I'm going to start off with a demo. So if I share what's going on over here on the agenda, get a little demo and discussion about the wasmCloud 1.0 showcase. Now you can actually see, get out of here, if you look at our documentation on the wasmCloud site, that we have cut a wasmCloud 1.0 release candidate. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what to expect from that, run through kind of a quick example, kind of go through some of our new documentation. And then I'm going to talk a little about this last item here, which is really just a call for your help and feedback. We've been working pretty tirelessly towards the release of 1.0. Now that we have a release candidate, we're essentially drawing the line in the sand saying, hey, unless it's very pressing, no new features, no breaking changes should be going in after this point. And so we're going to kind of collect all of the bugs, any rough edges that we can find, and essentially work towards just making the 1.0 experience really, really nice. And so that we can cut the release with all new tools for Wadum and Wash and et cetera, et cetera. So without just talking, why don't I go ahead and show you a little bit about what the 1.0 experience is going to look like. So I'm going to run through one of our favorite examples. And this is actually a new example that should go into main very, very soon. I actually, GitHub Actions was having a little bit of service degradation this morning, so it was failing on an action. Yes, I will blame it on GitHub. Don't worry about that. This will be in mains, probably shortly after the call. So essentially the end state of our quick start tutorial on the documentation is having a component that's using WASI HTTP, WASI key value, and WASI logging in order to make up a small microservice application. So, okay. So what we have at the end of this tutorial is essentially a key value counter. And so I committed this into main so that everybody can take a look at it. But let me go ahead and run through creating this and then go through some new sections at the end of our quick start. So I can use wash new to generate a new component, from this branch, from this example. This is all stuff that you could do before. We'll call it key value counter. Now so I have, as you can see with this cool little terminal plugin thing, I have wash 0.27 alpha 2 installed. This is the one that I'm pretty much asking everybody to test with. And if we look at the code, not too much has changed here from the previous example. From the end, we're essentially interpreting the path to find out what bucket we should use in the key value store. And then we're incrementing a value in that bucket and then returning that value in the response. So great. Key value counter, the same kind of component we've always used. But of course, what we are using to get it done is WASI HTTP incoming handler and the WASI key value specification essentially was proposed as 020 draft. So we can run wash build to build this. And I should be running Redis. I'm not. Go ahead and run that in the background. So now we have our component built and signed, and here's where you can find it. You can always inspect this component, which we are still signing using Wash out of the box. So this component specifically has an identity key for me and for the component itself. This is essentially extra wasmCloud metadata now as of 1.0, and we have some better documentation now on how you can use that to gate what components you're starting in your wasmCloud cluster. But we don't have capabilities anymore. The notion of a wasmCloud capability is completely thrown out the door in favor of just using the information that's embedded in the component's WIT. So very Wasm components native way of running wasmCloud. Now, Colin, this is actually something that you ran into when you were updating your examples, that the Wadum manifest was not in the right format. And so this is updated as of that PR that needs to merge. But taking a look at what changed in the WADA manifest format, it still looks largely the same. We are starting a component. This one is from a file, but you can also start components and capabilities from OCI registries, same as before. The big change is the structure of this link. So instead of the link being between an actor and a provider, it's a one-way connection for a specific WASI interface. So this one makes sure to connect this component to the Redis key value capability, which is actually implementing this interface at runtime and interacting with a Redis store. So we are able to tell it to use these two interfaces from WASI key value and give it some configuration. So we're giving a target configuration since the Redis provider is the thing that connects to Redis. Now, the other end of this is on the HTTP server capability provider side. So this is actually doing the interaction with the network, and it's going to listen on port 8080 and forward all incoming handler requests to the component that it's linked to. So very similar structure to the way that we did things for links pre 1.0, just very component native. It is specifically anything coming in on WASI HTTP is going to this component. Um, and this ends up being a really robust way to compose these things together at runtime. So let me go ahead and launch wasmCloud. And once I do that, I can take a look at the inventory. I can see that nothing particularly is running on this wasmCloud host. And I can see that I don't have any applications deployed. So what I can do is deploy this manifest. And if we take a look at the application, you can see actually you'll see a lot of things happen a lot quicker in wasmCloud 1.0. We've done a good bit of optimizations, so you can see that it pretty much immediately deployed here, which part of that is I've downloaded the resources before, but it's very, very snappy. And if we take a look at the inventory of this host, we can talk a little bit about the structure of this name in a second. I will mention it because it bothers me, but we can see that we have we have the component deployed. We're still waiting on the provider. So if we tail this host, we'll just go ahead and wait for that. We should have just the one host. So give me just a moment. So I thought, we'll just give it a second. So essentially what this is going to go do is deploy that component in the providers as well. I am going to be pretty upset if I wasn't lying about GitHub. Okay, there. Might have just needed to download that. So if we take a look at the inventory, we can see that we got the key value Redis provider and the HTTP server provider downloaded. That's just looking at the log. So if I curl localhost 8080/sup, we get for the specific counter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are actually incrementing the counter. Very fun. We can change it so it'd be something like community call and we get a different bucket. Very fun. So this is the key value counter example, but it is all working on 1.0 using these component links. Now, what I wanted to do for the showcase, which is just a little bit fun, we can go through the next section in the quick start that I've added the scale and distribute section, because a lot of people know that you can scale WebAssembly components and they know that wasmCloud can be connected in a distributed way. But I actually wanted to show off two simple things here and one feature from sorry, my dog. One feature from a very, very cool community member that is now featured here in the intro docs. So we can update this scale to say, hey, I want to make sure that this component can handle 100 concurrent requests. All great stuff. Updating the scale of a component is super easy. And actually doing this doesn't take up any more passive resources since it's kind of a ceiling. We spin the component up on demand to handle a request. I'm sorry, dark mode. Now, what you can run through in the documentation now is this little section called distribute globally. Now you're able to do this essentially based on your own prerogative, as complicated as you'd like to do it. But as long as your wasmCloud hosts are connected together through NATs, Wadum is able to schedule these components on these different hosts, no matter where they're actually physically or virtually running. So what I'm going to do is add this block to the spread scaler trait here for Wadum. Say, hey, of these 100 replicas, I want to spread them across two different availability zones, one in US East 1 and one in US West 1. 20% of them in West, 80% in East. You can kind of see how you can put this together in order to do, a third of your instances in three availability zones. Now, the way that my version, I did not. The way that I like to demonstrate this in documentation is by launching multiple hosts locally. So you can use this super cool new feature called multi-local with Wash. So one of our community members, think his name was Colin Murphy, came in and added a feature to Wash, where running Wash up will essentially be a lot more like Docker Compose up, where you idempotently launch a host. So if you keep running Wash up, it will just say, hey, you already have a host running. Great, you did it. And this ends up being really nice for just, at any time you can run Wash up and make sure that you have a host. But if we wanted to launch multiple, we can add multi-local, and I can add a label called zone US East 1. We'll run it in the background, and then I'll do the same thing for US West 1. Now, if I run washgit inventory, we should see our three wasmCloud hosts here. I'll zoom out a little bit for formatting. Is this too small to see? Is it like really, really tiny text? It's probably small. That's okay. We don't need to do that. But you can see that we have one wasmCloud host running in US East 1, one wasmCloud host running in US West 1, and then my original wasmCloud host that I ran. So now what we can do is deploy the new version of our application. And if we take a look at the JSON output of our inventory, we can see where everything is running. And if we take a look at our host that's running in the East Coast, you see it's received 80% of the instances that's in my spread. So 80 of them are running in East. We can see that my host that is running in West has received 20% of our instances, which is 20. This works out really nice on the math. You can change it around. If you do 1,000, it's 800, 200, all that fun stuff. But now we've essentially spread this application out across multiple zones. So this is the type of experience that you should be able to expect when you try out 1.0 for the first time. Kind of as you go through the tutorial, you get the same microservice that you're used to, the key value counter, kind of give you a really nice base for creating a WebAssembly component. And I did this example in Rust, but of course we have the examples in Rust, TinyGo, JavaScript, TypeScript, and Python. So you can choose the language of your choice and then get, by the end, something that you've essentially set up to scale across different zones. So I think this is a really awesome intro experience for the 1.0 of wasmCloud. And this is going to lead pretty well into the next section in the community call where I ask for folks to go and try this out. But I want to pause and see if folks have any questions for that section.
So is this the first time we've talked about the interfaces on component, like in Wadum or in the command that needs to be updated in the docs? I don't mean that as a slight, but I just mean like in the alpha docs as they're in progress. Is that because it seems like, I'm sure everyone knows is thinking the same thing, but like you should be able through introspection of WIT be able to generate those and add them into a Wadum. And I think like that other tool that I'm forgetting about is that kind of GUI tool that you just, is going to do that.
So I have sneaky eventual plans. I want to do a couple different things. I want to be able to do like a WDAM generators that'll use the WIT, like you're saying, and be able to just generate those for you automatically. I also have sneaky plans to be able to do what's whack to WIT. So that's a composition language that sits on top of it, or whack to WDAM. And it can take like a whack file. So if you're composing a bunch of components together locally, you can output them to a WDAM manifest, then you can run those components distributed. I have not done that yet. I will likely get a little bit of hack time available now that 1.0 is going to be out soon, and then I'll do it. But anyway, those are the two things I think we'll probably head down because that's one of the joys about using Wit. It's all introspectable, like you're saying.
Yeah. And that what that Watt sorry. It's not Watt. Is it Watt? Is that the language that like isn't we there was something there was a language that you only see in like reference from some of the newer docs that are coming out of Bytecode Alliance, and it's like there's no actual spec for the language yet. But like, is there a
Whack
spec
Wit.
for WAC? Yeah, for WAC.
Whack, there is a spec.
Oh,
I'll link
okay.
that for people who are curious. Um, that should be, it's under Peter Hune's repo right now. It's going to be
Okay.
hopefully, and it is a Bytecode Alliance thing. Bailey can tell me
Yeah.
when it's going to be in there. Oh, thanks, Victor. You
Thanks,
beat me.
man. Thanks, man.
Yeah, that's the thing.
All right.
I'm not gonna lie, the docs themselves are a little bit bad. I have actual examples of this working in my WasmCon Wasm
Oh
Day
yeah. No, this is it. Yeah,
ones.
this is it. I didn't know there was a spec. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
gonna let me pull this up.
so WAC's been accepted as the Bytecode Alliance project officially. Peter is wrapping up a couple different cleanup items that he's doing before he transfers it into the Bytecode Alliance organization, but I expect that to happen within the week. And there are now multiple different collaborators and maintainers of the project, so it's rolling pretty fast, it seems.
So is the idea we're gonna just have WAC and that's gonna spit out WIT? Is that kind of like
Whack is a superset of Wit,
right? It's a superset.
and then I want to have a Whack to Wadam that shows you
Yeah.
how to. We're well invested in this space specifically for this reason, but a Whack to Wadam that'll basically show you how to do it in a distributed way, because some of those things like running in a distributed way is not exactly a core thing of Whack. So yeah, and if you're for those who are curious in here, I have a bunch of Whack files in this repo that I just posted in chat. That was from my Wasm Day EU demo. So anyway, you can see what Whack looks like. It's actually not too difficult once you understand like what's going on. But yeah, that's kind of I think the idea.
From my perspective, Black is very much something for platform teams to write. Hey, I've got these two different components that they scale together and therefore they make sense running together. I find that the syntax in WAC is a little wacky. Pardon my pun, but it's fine, and it works for what you're trying to do. But I feel that with DAM brings it up to a different level about how you would run this in a distributed way with all the context that you need for how to actually run this app. And my interest is that we have some automatic pieces both for creating your WDAM side, but in the future, I think there's the reverse is also true, where our platform, which is an application platform, will use the telemetry that we have to do something really intelligent that perhaps builds WAC because these things are scaling together, because they're working together, and then we automatically understand the compositions that need to be done. We have all the information in the context, but in a distributed context, which is not a context that you would have with WAC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean it's like Docker going from Docker Compose to Kubernetes.
yeah, it's that's a great way to say it. Actually, is it's Docker Compose compared to like what Kubernetes does, and like this is why we get that question sometimes from people. Why did you reinvent your own format? And it's explicitly because of this, because this is a higher level construct of running something in a distributed way. And there's nothing that really lets you do that right now. There's no other format that really describes that in a way that understands components. So it's just like that. Like WAC is more of the Docker Compose thing, and then you end up with WDAM being something more like Kubernetes.
Yeah, that should be an easy analogy for most people to understand, just because the WDAM looks like a Kubernetes manifest file, which I think is very, very useful. That was a really good design choice. Oh, yeah. Well, nobody here loves. Well, wait, I'm not gonna say anything. I sympathize with the oh no if that was about the formatting choice. But adoption. We're here for adoption.
Yeah, I was really interested in hacking around on like a wit to Wadham type, just even if it's just an experiment and kind of fun to play around with. It's um, for all of our examples, we're essentially handing you the out of the box Wadham, but we know everything that you need to know about a component running at runtime from the wit, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and
Um,
also I think I kind of think wit is not very intuitive. At least like importing versus exporting, I still have to like every time I'm gonna write one. Although not that that's happened too many times, but I was making some components to try to add them as examples. And I was like, am I importing or am I exporting? Or I'm sure it'll make sense once I've done it a few more times, but it's kind of confusing.
Peter, who is also behind WAC, created wasmbuilder.app. I felt
Okay.
like that was one of the handy tools that I used initially that really helped visualize it. And I expect us to have something very similar in the wasmCloud ecosystem for this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just you have to learn. It's something else to learn. Whereas WDAM seems pretty intuitive if you're coming from a Kubernetes background.
that makes sense. Folks have other questions or things that they wanted to see more from the key value demo.
Yes.
I did get Yeah, I did get some good feedback in the comment from Jordas. With Jordas, you're welcome to expand on if you'd like, but just in general, a call. It'd be great to see a component triggered with a messaging type interface, like send a message to a Nats topic and trigger a component. That's something we can totally do. And then have a persistent store or a connection pool or something on the other end that really shows off the provider side, which is also totally something we can do. Bailey's demo that she did for what was that event? WASM Day. On the other end, I think it was HTTP triggered, but it was interacting with the file system using the blob store capability. So that went to the file system, and then we swapped that to Azure Blob Store. So we've got, I mean, the world is our oyster here. I'm really excited to have a little bit of hack time because from the base of capabilities, it's really, really easy to compose this type of demo. And since wasmCloud has complete support for custom interfaces, you can just make your own and do that as well. So, um,
Yeah. And I think that's really the next stage too, or whatever. It's for me, myopically, for me, I'd love to just make a whole bunch of components that are, I think the first one I did was broadly compression, and then like, hey, let's do some encryption. Just stuff to just have useful little pieces. I don't know. That's what I would like to add in here, because it is so hard to do the component model outside of wasmCloud right now. Still, so yeah, I don't know. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, for me, Brooke, the most important part, the messaging, I get it, but it's like the statefulness of, one of these components holding to a connection pool, something like that. Instead of, being stateless components, if you wish.
Yeah, so like actually the provider component having important state that it's holding onto and not interacting with an external state store. I mean, it can do
Yes.
that, but yeah.
Yeah, so instead of creating, let's say, TCP or any network connection to a database on the fly and then shutting it down, just stay there consuming messages with holding to a given connection until you stop the component.
And of course, that's how our providers work today, right? Like most of them implement a connection pool.
Right. Yeah, which before it makes sense. Now I don't know, like, okay, no longer providers, but like where do I do the providers now?
Still in there. Just change the name.
Something that I'm actually going to be working on tomorrow with Eric here is going to be updating the developer guide for capability providers. So what I'd really like to have on the other end of that is a guide that shows you how to implement an existing contract, like wasmCloud messaging. We'll talk about NATs or something like that. And then also a guide on how to create a new capability provider with your own, full custom interface. I think that should be a really good base for anybody who's looking to write a capability provider. That should give you the whole, um, that should give you the whole kind of spectrum. And since we're using the same interface, I can just include a component in there that you can use to test it, which I think will be pretty cool.
Yeah. Is there any kind of, I mean, Taylor, I have to watch your talk. Like but sometimes it might be a little confusing. This might be off topic. So, but the idea of chaining, I don't know how complex you can make things. Seems like everything kind of has to be off a central component. I mean, I don't know if you can like have one component talk to another and that one talks to another and comes back to the previous one. I mean, you can, but I think
Yes.
it's just hard to, maybe WAC solves the problem. I have to just look at WAC, but it's kind of hard to, no? Bailey's shaking her head. Okay,
Bailey,
because
go ahead, and then I'll talk
it's
if
like
there's anything else.
it's hard to conceptually have like
So
pieces like that.
fundamentally, what it comes down to is the state of WASI.2 is we do our async behavior with a WASI primitive type called a WASI pullable. And the way that basically works is that there's a pullable table that either the host, by default, this is the way it works. The host has this table, and that's how it's like, oh, okay, well, I need to, I'm holding on to the state and I know when to do effectively callbacks, right? That's really what it is underneath. And so a stream and WASI HTTP call and all of that builds on top of this pullable primitive. And in tools like wasmVirt, which Taylor showed off, wasmVirt is now the thing that has the state. Because you virtualize it so that the host doesn't necessarily have to implement any of those parts or hold on to any of that state and that kind of thing. So the challenge, though, is that because there's not a full async system that's running, that's part of the component model ABI, then you have to have that thing. You have to have one thing that holds it. And that's kind of what you were saying about that monolith thing. So in the demo that Taylor showed, he did show composition going in different directions. And the way to do that was by having that one wasmVirt component. And that's why there today is only one, even though when we were originally designing it, we wanted it to be modular for each effectively WASI interface that we were virtualizing. But that's not going to be the case with WASI.3 because WASI.3 introduces native async.
Right.
Luke's talk on this was brilliant at wasm.io. And I recommend checking that out. We've got a great design for it. And then we also have like guest implementations of that's going really well. So the answer is today, if you want to do something like that, you can do service chaining is the term that we're using. If you're talking about combining WASI HTTP components together, that's a service chain. And there's a lot of folks that are planning on running that in production. I know of several different projects that are spinning up to do this, and service chaining is fully supported today. But you have that one caveat of understanding how we have to run async today until we have native async as part of the component model ABI.
Right. Yeah, I saw his plumbers. I didn't see the wasm.io one. But yeah.
Plumbers was definitely practice for wasm.io, so
okay.
got a lot of it.
I stole a bunch of it when I gave like an internal talk.
I don't remember why I raised my hand.
You just wanted to feel recognized.
Yeah. Thanks
It's
for
his meeting. He's got a lead.
Actually, speaking of, I think it probably would be good to move on, but we should have some time at the end for any other questions and discussion for sure. So I just had one more discussion item on the list for today. I wanted to talk about the 1.0 release candidate. So all the stuff that you just saw me demo was using the latest release version of Wash, and essentially was just running through the wasmCloud Quick Start. And I'm confident that I found a few things that I would love to fix. Here's my little list of notes of things that annoyed me when I was running through the quick start. Oh, wait, that was just page one. Here's the other page. It's all really, really small stuff. But I just want to call out that none of these things are features. It's just like, hey, it would be great if this output didn't have this new line here, little things like that in Wash and Wadham. And though I'm trying to take it, and all of us on the wasmCloud side are trying to take it from the perspective of people who haven't been looking at this all day, every day for the last few months. I think it is going to be infinitely more valuable to have any of you who have some spare time to also take a look at the 1.0 experience. I know that Colin, you've been taking a look at this already. I know that some of the other folks maybe Tyler, I'm not sure if you've actually taken a look at it, have been doing wild stuff like installing these binaries from branches of off of branches of main, and so I really, really appreciate that. But I also really, really want to ask for your help for testing the release candidate. So if you have existing workloads that you need to migrate over to 1.0 or things you've been playing with, please see how it works with this one. The latest version of Wash, the Wash CLI 0.27 Alpha 2 is the good one to test with. That includes a version of Wadham that is compatible. If you're running into things, I just want to, I'm trying to keep this GitHub discussion as a running list of things that we know are either limitations or known issues. One of them, for example, around updating the quick starts on wasmcloud.com. I can go ahead and check off. This was something that I was working on yesterday. I just wanted to note it in case somebody came here. So we're going to keep a pretty robust list on this discussion of just things that we're knocking out on the 1.0 related tools. Again, the main goal here is just to be doubly sure that we don't have breaking changes or new features that we want to add in the in wasmCloud before 1.0. So there's a good chance that some of these things are going to be kicked to issues, good first issues, things that we can tackle as little patch releases and things like that. So one thing that I do want to call out is that a possible feature add, something that we oh, that is a real thing, something that landed yesterday is a really nice refactor and streamlining of the WASI key value interface that merged into the proposal for WASI key value. And this is both going to make the WASI key value interface nicer to use on the component side. And it's going to, if we can put it into the next wasmCloud release candidate, make it a little nicer on our end for not having to kind of immediately adapt to an interface that's already changed. So this is the only possible feature add that we're considering now for the next 1.0 release candidate. And not really much will change here. It's just an update to the interface, and you can update the component that comes out of the quick start, for example, and we can have a guide for that. But this is the only thing that we're considering right now. And I would be happy to make the case for it. Taylor, I think you wrote this PR, right? Like you wrote some of the changes here. Did you want to talk about what it does and why we're considering it?
Yeah, so here's where I share my screen. Hey, Liam, I mean Brooks, can you give me screen sharing permissions?
Come on.
Each day you grow one step closer to Liam. Okay.
Careful, careful, Taylor. Those are fighting words.
Okay. Okay. So we just merged this in. I worked on this with several people from the community, including Kate Goldenring from Fermion, and then other people like Luke and Joe from Microsoft as well, on getting this all together. So if any of you end up watching this, thanks for all the help here. The main thing is that this is now much more streamlined. There's not any dependencies. For those who are familiar with WIT, normally you'd see like a dependencies folder here. There are no external dependencies anymore. And the key interface has is more cleanly named and has the guarantees around it all documented. and it is all now part of a resource called a bucket, and that bucket has the methods on it. So you're going to have something that looks more familiar. You'll get your bucket or your client essentially and say like bucket.get and the key, and then bucket.set and get the key, and those and get whatever you need to there. So and no, that's on purpose, Brooks. I didn't want to name the thing atomic. So we're trying to make them nouns. Is what we were going off of. It was some naming suggestions from Luke. So anyway, this is just much simpler. If you look at this before, this looked really crazy because it was using wasmIO streams and a couple other things. So now there's no extra dependencies here. It's straightforward. There's some things around batch that use it borrowed. You can actually read a lot of the documentation here, but essentially everything's been like streamlined and simplified to make it really easy to use. So that's one of the reasons we're really interested in this is there's no more of the stream stuff that makes it easier to adapt in the future, and it keeps it fairly straightforward. It's more along the lines of what wasmCloud was already doing and what Spin was already doing and what basically a lot of people were already doing around key value type workloads. So it's all fairly streamed together. So anyway, that's where we're at there. That's why we're considering bringing it in, because adapting the current one, if we released it as is, would be kind of a bit of a nightmare with all the streams. And so it just seems better to throw this in there. And I'm pretty sure no one's going to complain, as evidenced by the fact that Tyler was in there like, yes, finally, and which is how I feel about it, because yeah, this should be a lot simpler to consume and use. So we think it's worth adding an extra feature as into the next RC. So in case anyone is testing out RC1 and you're doing something with key value, just be aware that this is likely to change, but for the better. You're just going to have to go delete probably a lot of code you don't need anymore, and then change a few things in it to match the new structures. So anyway, that's where we're at with the WASI key value. I just wanted to call that out because I was super glad it landed.
So it's all synchronous now.
Yes, it's all synchronous. It's not using the streams. I mean, it's asynchronous for most things under the hood that are actually implementing it, but it's a synchronous call. The only thing that doesn't do it is the key. If you're listing keys, it uses a pagination cursor, because those could be really large and might be too big for a WebAssembly component. So
what about just fetching the data?
Fetching the data. Fetching the data.
It's key value. It's not. Sorry. It's key value. It's not object store.
Yeah, object store will still use streams specifically for that reason. So what we've really been focusing on as champions, this is just good general knowledge for sharing. What we've been focusing on as champions of these interfaces inside of wasmCloud is really honing in on the 80% use case. What is the most common API people are going to need to use? And this is what it's going to be. If you're shoving some absurdly large amount of data in a key value store, you should probably use like a custom interface or a blob store. That's the kind of thing we're taking with this. And then like things like a blob store where obviously things are going to be huge, we'll use streams. And so we're trying to keep the dependencies a lot lower and simplify the APIs as much as possible. So you'll see this coming up probably with messaging next. I have some debating some debating there with some people in the community to figure out what we want to do.
Well, and to your point too, the whole stream thing's going to change with 3.
Yes, and that's the other reason we are trying to. This is not like set in stone. The whole point is we're trying to get that good foundation that we can iteratively add stuff to as we go along.
Yeah,
I remembered why I raised my hand earlier. Just want to be super clear as we talk about like things that are landing in WASI Preview 3, like everything changing when we get to streams and everything. And people who are looking at us who are releasing a 1.0 maybe asking if this is a breaking change and going to like a 2.0. But it's not. The WebAssembly component model and the way these WIT interfaces are designed are very specifically so that we can, inside of wasmCloud and inside of our tooling, adapt to the older versions or adapt to the newer versions of interfaces. So we should be able to adopt WASI Preview 3, Preview 4, things like that, or WASI P3, WASI P4 without bumping a major version in wasmCloud. So that was it's great to have WASI 0.2 as the base. That was a kind of a big requirement for us, but from here on out, we have a really nice stable base where we can adapt forwards.
That was it for that side. I have more stuff, Brooks, since we're towards the end of the agenda, but
Yeah, I think that was pretty much all that I had there. I will just probably post another announcement in the wasmCloud Slack to say, hey, love it if y'all go out and test this stuff. Let me know what you think, if you think things can be improved. But we're fully in the stage now of nailing down these last couple of things for the 1.0 release, which is a great place to be. So, Taylor, off and away.
hey, a couple different things. Those are just more things to be aware of. I've mentioned in here we've been working on the OCI spec for components and WASM in general. We're going to be bringing that back to the main WebAssembly working group inside of the CNCF next Tuesday. So if you are interested in these topics, please do come to that. We're going to be kind of going and giving an overview of everything that's going on there. Luckily, it's early enough. I will not miss it, even though I'll be at Open Source Summit, which leads me to my second thing. We're going to be, Jonas, who's one of our coworkers, is going to be speaking at KCD Texas. I will be there as well. So if you're going to be in the vicinity, please feel free to drop by and say hi. And then next week at Open Source Summit, I will be there and be ready to mingle around with anyone who'd like to talk. My talk's on Tuesday, right before lunch. So if you're watching any live streams, or I don't know if they're live streaming it or not, but I'll be giving some more information around Kubernetes and WASM. So that should be pretty fun. So just keep that up, keep that in mind as well. That will be next week. So I think those are the main ones.
All right, folks. Well, I think we're at the end of our regularly scheduled agenda. We, for months and months, have been doing a roadmap check-in at the end of the community meeting. And looking forward, we are going to be putting together, essentially a from here into a 1.1 wasmCloud roadmap. So once we have that ready on in the documentation and the board in GitHub, we're kind of putting that all together now. I will do another update on the roadmap since I know that as we got closer and closer to 1.0, the number of things for people to take for 1.0 got smaller and smaller. And I really appreciate folks who are reaching out and looking to contribute. But with that being said, I think we're at our free time at the end of the community call. Folks have things that they'd like to talk about in the general wasmCloud space, the broader WebAssembly ecosystem. Just jump right in.
I mean, it wouldn't be a wasmCloud call if we didn't mention WasmCon coming this June 24th and 25th to Seattle, Washington. For anyone interested in seeing the wasmCloud crew, Cosmonic folks live will be out in force talking about all the things. If you still have a talk and you missed the cutoff, we are still reviewing sessions. So feel free to reach out if you are in the customer space or it's an exceptionally worthy idea. The program committee has a lot of latitude here. We ultimately just want to make the best event for the whole community, and we've got a bit of discretion there. So feel free to share your best ideas, and we hope to see you there. It was a phenomenal event last year. We had 253 people in attendance. We had over 50 talks. So it was a real who's who in the WebAssembly ecosystem. And this year is going to be bigger and better than ever. So we hope to see you there. Thank you, Brooks, for sharing your screen.
All right, folks. Other questions? What topics? Alrighty, then I think we can go ahead and call it for this one. Thanks everyone for coming out. Really looking forward to seeing your feedback on any testing you do with 1.0. Please feel free to just reach out in Slack and go get hacking. It's a fun time to be testing with wasmCloud. So we'll see you next week.